My apartment burned down in a single night, and I ran out barefoot with nothing but my phone and the smell of smoke in my hair when I called my parents. My mother said, "Not our problem," like I was a stranger who dialed the wrong number. But then a fire investigator started asking questions only family could answer, and I realized someone had been using my life like a key. The smell hit me before the sound did. It was not the cozy, wood smoke scent of a fireplace in late October, nor was it the acrid sharpness of burnt toast. It was heavy, synthetic, and oily. It tasted like melting plastic and old dust. I choked, coughing into my pillow, my brain stumbling out of a dream about drowning in murky water, only to wake up and realize the air in my bedroom was actually thick, gray, and moving. Then the alarm screamed. It was a jagged, piercing shriek that seemed to vibrate in the roots of my teeth. I rolled out of bed, my feet hitting the floorboards, and the heat was already there. It was not a warm room. It was a living thing, breathing against the walls. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand out of pure muscle memory. The screen lighting up with the time, 3:14 in the morning. I did not grab my purse. I did not grab the photo album on the shelf, the one with the only picture I had of my grandmother holding me. I did not grab a coat. Panic, I learned in that second, is not a series of choices. It is a biological imperative. It is a command that bypasses the logic centers of the brain and screams run. I tore open the bedroom door and the hallway was gone. It was replaced by a wall of black smoke that rolled over the ceiling like an inverted tide. I dropped to my knees, the air clearer down low, and crawled toward the front door. The heat was pressing against my back, a physical weight, urging me forward. I could hear glass shattering somewhere in the living room, the sound distinct and musical against the roaring backdrop of the fire. I fumbled with the deadbolt. My fingers felt numb, detached from my body. The metal was hot, not warm, but hot enough to sting. I shoved the bolt back, twisted the knob, and fell out into the corridor. The building hallway was chaotic. Doors were opening, people were shouting names. I scrambled to my feet, my bare soles slapping against the thin industrial carpet. I joined the stream of bodies moving toward the stairwell. I saw Mrs. Higgins from 4B clutching her cat so tight the animal looked bug-eyed. I saw the young guy from the third floor wearing only boxer briefs, his face sheer white in the emergency lighting. We spilled out of the front entrance and into the biting chill of the November night. The cold was a shock, a violent slap against my heated skin. I stumbled over the curb and onto the asphalt of the parking lot, finally turning around to look back. It was my home. It was a 3-story brick building that had stood on that corner for 40 years. And it was being eaten. Flames were not just flickering, they were crawling. That was the only word for it. They moved with intent, licking up the side of the structure, curling around the window frames like fingers searching for purchase. I watched the glass of my own living room window blow out. A tongue of orange fire lashed out into the night, followed by a plume of black smoke that disappeared into the dark sky. I stood there, shivering violently, my arms wrapped around my chest, clutching my phone like a talisman. I had no shoes. I was wearing a thin, oversized t-shirt and pajama shorts. The asphalt was freezing, biting into my skin, but I could not look away. It felt like the fire was searching for something inside that building. It felt personal. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder, overlaying the crackle and roar of the destruction. I watched my life turn into carbon and ash, and the only thought in my head, looping over and over again, was a nonsensical question: did I leave the stove on? I knew I hadn't. I hadn't cooked in 2 days, but the guilt was immediate, a reflex. I must have done something wrong. I must have caused this. By the time the fire trucks arrived, turning the street into a kaleidoscope of red and white lights, I couldn't feel my toes anymore. The Civic Center was 3 blocks away, a cavernous gymnasium that smelled of floor wax and stale sweat. They had set up cots in precise, military rows. The Red Cross volunteers were moving with a calm, efficient speed that I found mesmerizing. They were the only things making sense. I sat on a metal folding chair, wrapped in a gray wool blanket that scratched my neck. A woman named Brenda, according to the laminate tag on a lanyard around her neck, crouched down in front of me. She had a clipboard and a kind, tired face. Name, she asked gently. Hazel Ross, I said. My voice sounded wrecked, like I had been screaming for hours, though I hadn't said a word since I woke up. Unit number 3C. Brenda wrote it down. She paused, looking at the chart. That was the top floor. You're lucky to be out. Hazel. I nodded. It didn't feel like luck. It felt like theft. Do you have family you can stay with? Brenda asked, her pen hovering over the next section of the form. We have space here. Obviously. But it's going to be loud and crowded. If you have anywhere else to go, we recommend it. The question hung in the air. Family. Technically, yes. My parents lived 20 minutes away in a suburb that prided itself on manicured lawns and silence. It was a big house. 4 bedrooms. Since I moved out 12 years ago, my old room had been converted into a guest room that nobody ever used. Yes, I said. My parents are nearby. Brenda smiled. A tight, sympathetic expression. That is good. You should call them. Let them know you're safe. Do you need a charger? I shook my head and held up my phone. I had 40% battery left. I waited until Brenda moved on to the next shivering tenant before I unlocked the screen. My fingers were shaking so badly I had to tap the contact name 3 times before it registered. Mom. It rang. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. I looked at the time. 4:15 in the morning. They would be asleep. My father slept like the dead. But my mother was a light sleeper. She would hear it. On the 5th ring, the line clicked open. Hello? Her voice was not groggy. It was clear. Alert. Mom, I said. And to my horror, I started to cry. The sound just broke out of my throat. A wet, ugly sob. It's Hazel. There was a fire. My apartment building. It's gone. It's all burning. There was a pause on the other end. Not a gasp. Not a question asking if I was hurt. Just a silence that felt heavy and thick. Are you injured? She asked. No. I got out. But I don't have anything. I'm at the Civic Center. I don't have shoes. Mom. I waited for the rush of instructions. Stay there. We are coming. Dad is getting the car keys. I waited for the safety net that every child, no matter how old, believes exists at the bottom of the fall. Instead, I heard her exhale. It sounded like annoyance. Hazel, she said. The tone was flat, rehearsed. It sounded like she was reading a line from a script she had memorized moments before picking up. We can't help you with this. I blinked, the tears cold on my cheeks. What, we can't have you here, she said. Your father and I, we have a lot going on right now. It is simply not possible. Mom, I said, my voice rising, cracking. My apartment burned down. I am barefoot in a gymnasium. I just need a place to sleep for a night or 2. Just until I talk to insurance. Not our problem, she said. The words were precise. They were like 3 distinct stones dropped into a pond. Not our problem. Is Dad there? I asked, desperation making me pathetic. Let me talk to Dad. He is sleeping, she said immediately. And he will say the same thing. You are 34 years old. Hazel, you need to handle your own affairs. We cannot be your crutch every time something goes wrong. Every time I hadn't asked them for money in a decade. I hadn't asked for help when I had the flu last year. I saw them on holidays. I bought them birthday gifts. I was the good daughter, the quiet one. Mom, please, I whispered. Figure it out. Hazel, she said, and then the line went dead. I stared at the phone. The call duration was 58 seconds. I sat there in the gray blanket, surrounded by strangers who were hugging each other, crying into shoulders, sharing phones. I felt a coldness that had nothing to do with the temperature outside. It was a hollowing out, a realization that the people who had made me had looked at my disaster and decided to close the blinds. Hey, Hazel. I looked up. Chloe, a girl from the marketing department at my office, was standing there. She was wearing a coat over pajama pants, her hair in a messy bun. She lived 2 streets over from me. I had forgotten that. I saw the news alerts. She said, looking terrified. I thought, I knew you lived in the brick building. Are you okay? I opened my mouth to say yes, to be professional, to be the Hazel Ross who filed reports on time and never caused drama. But nothing came out except a dry heave. Chloe sat down next to me and put an arm around the blanket. It's okay, she said. It's okay. Do you have somewhere to go? I looked at my phone, dark in my hand. No, I said. I don't. You're coming with me, she said firmly. I have an air mattress. It's not much, but it's warm. I wanted to say no. I wanted to salvage some scrap of dignity, but I was barefoot and my mother had just told me I was not her problem. Okay, I whispered. Thank you. Chloe's apartment was small. It was a 1-bedroom unit filled with plants and the smell of vanilla candles. It was cloyingly normal. She set up the air mattress in the living room, moving her coffee table against the wall. She lent me a pair of sweatpants and thick socks. She made tea. She was frantically kind. The way people are when they are terrified that what happened to you might happen to them. I lay on the plastic mattress, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. The living room was cramped. My head was near the hallway, my feet near the television stand. I felt massive and intrusive, a giant accumulation of tragedy taking up space in her sanctuary. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the flames crawling up the brick. I smelled the smoke, and I heard my mother's voice. Not our problem. Why wasn't it their problem? It was their daughter. If the roles were reversed, if their house had burned, I would have been there in 10 minutes. I would have given them my bed. The humiliation was a physical ache in my chest. I was 34. I was supposed to be established. I was supposed to be safe. And in the span of 4 hours, I had been reduced to a charity case sleeping on a coworker's floor, wearing borrowed socks. The sun came up slowly, a gray, reluctant dawn that offered no comfort. At 9 a.m, I went back. I had to. I needed my wallet, my passport, the hard drive with 10 years of work on it. Chloe drove me. She waited in the car, idling at the corner, while I walked toward the police tape. The building was a skeleton. The roof was gone. The windows were jagged black eyes staring out at the street. The smell was overpowering, now wet ash, charred wood, and something chemical that stuck to the back of the throat. A man in a heavy canvas jacket with fire marshal stenciled on the back was standing near the entrance with a clipboard. I approached him, flashing the ID. I had tucked into my phone case the only identification I had left. I'm in 3C. I said, I need to see if I can get my things. He looked at me, then at the building. He was older, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite and left in the rain. 3rd floor is unstable, ma'am, he said. Roof collapse in the north corner. But 3C is on the south side. We can do a quick escort. 5 minutes. Grab essentials only. Do not touch anything you don't have to. The structural integrity is compromised. He handed me a hard hat. I put it on. It felt ridiculous. We walked up the stairs. The stairwell was sodden with water. It squelched under the boots Chloe had lent me. The walls were streaked with soot, black handprints where people had stumbled in the dark. When we reached the 3rd floor, the devastation was total. The ceiling in the hallway had come down in chunks. We stepped over sodden drywall and twisted metal. My door 3C was at the end of the hall, and that was when I stopped. The hallway was blackened. The walls were charred alligator skin. The carpet was a melted synthetic sludge. But the frame of my door, it looked different. The wood around the jamb was scorched. Yes, but the deep, charcoal alligatoring that covered the rest of the hallway wasn't there. It looked like the fire had hesitated. It looked like someone had thrown water on it, or treated it with something that resisted the burn, just right there. The door itself was battered, forced open by the firefighters. The lock busted. Keep moving, ma'am, the marshal said. It's not safe to linger. I stepped inside my apartment. It was wet. Everything was wet. The smell was unbearable, but the fire hadn't gutted the interior the way it had the hallway. It had been hot. My television was melted into a Salvador Dali sculpture, but my books were still there, swollen with water but not ash. I grabbed my purse from the hook where I always left it. I grabbed the metal lockbox from under my bed that held my birth certificate and passport. I grabbed the laptop bag. 5 minutes, the marshal said from the doorway. I looked around. My life was trash. Wet, smelly trash. I walked out. As I passed the door frame again, I touched it. The wood felt slick, oily under the soot. "Why is this part less burned?" I asked. The marshal glanced at it, uninterested. "Fire moves in strange ways. Currents, drafts. Let's go." We walked back down. Outside. The news vans had arrived. A reporter with perfect hair and a microphone was standing near the police tape, interviewing a man I recognized as Mr. Henderson from the first floor. I kept my head down, pulling the borrowed coat tighter. But I heard Mr. Henderson's voice. He was angry. "I'm telling you." I was awake. He was saying, "I was watching the late game. I smelled smoke 10 minutes before that alarm went off. Minutes." I went into the hall and the manual pull station. I pulled it. Nothing happened. It was dead. The system didn't trip until the heat blew out the foyer glass. The reporter nodded, looking for a soundbite about tragedy, but Mr. Henderson was giving her liability. I walked past them to Chloe's car. I didn't want to be on the news. I didn't want my mother to see me and feel validated in her disgust. My phone buzzed as I sat in Chloe's passenger seat. An email. Sender Skyline Property Management. Subject incident at 440 Oak Street. I opened it, my thumb hovering over the screen. "Dear resident, as you are aware, a fire incident occurred at the property early this morning. We are cooperating fully with the fire department investigation. Due to the severity of the damage, the building has been condemned effective immediately. Per your lease agreement, the security deposit will be held pending an assessment of unit damages. Regarding relocation assistance, Skyline Management cannot disperse emergency funds until the insurance adjusters have completed their preliminary report and liability has been determined. This process may take 30 to 60 days. We recommend you contact your renter's insurance provider immediately. Regards, Skyline Management." I read it twice. Liability has been determined. They weren't going to help. They were going to hold my deposit, $2,000 that I desperately needed right now because my apartment had burned down. I felt a surge of panic that was sharper than the fear of the fire. I had $300 in my checking account. Payday was 4 days away. I had credit cards, but I had been trying to pay them down. Chloe looked at me. "Bad news. They aren't releasing any money." I said, "They're talking about liability. That's illegal." "Isn't it?" Chloe asked. "I don't know." I said, I felt small. I felt incredibly stupid for not knowing. "Can you drive me to my parents' house?" I asked. "I thought they said—" "I know what they said," I interrupted. "But I need to see them. I need to look them in the face, maybe on the phone." She didn't understand. "Maybe if they see me, covered in soot, they'll remember I'm their daughter." Chloe nodded. "Okay, let's go." The house was a colonial on a cul-de-sac. It looked pristine. The lawn was raked free of leaves. The shutters were a crisp, dark green. I walked up the driveway. My old car wasn't there. I had sold it 2 years ago to save on insurance. But my parents' sedan was in the driveway. They were home. I rang the doorbell. I waited. I knew they were inside. I could hear the television. I rang it again. Finally, the inner door opened. Then the storm door cracked open about 3 inches. The chain was on. My mother's face appeared in the gap. She looked impeccable. Her hair was done, her makeup applied. She was wearing a cashmere sweater I had never seen before. "Hazel," she said. Her voice wasn't angry. It was tight, like a wire about to snap. "I told you not to come here." "Mom, please," I said, pressing my hand against the glass of the storm door. "I don't have anywhere to go. The landlord won't give me my deposit. I just need a place for a few days. I'll sleep on the floor. I won't be in the way." "You are already in the way," she hissed. I recoiled. The venom in her voice was shocking. "Open the door." "Mom, please." She didn't move, but behind her, through the gap between her shoulder and the doorframe, I saw the hallway. Usually, the hallway was empty, just a runner rug and a side table with a vase. Today, it was stacked with plastic storage bins, gray and blue tubs, stacked 3 high, lined up against the wall. They were labeled with blue painter's tape. I squinted. Files, kitchen, master bed. "You're packing?" I asked, confused. "Are you going on a trip?" My mother shifted, blocking my view. "Go away. Hazel. If you stay here, I will call the police and tell them you are trespassing. Do not test me on this. The police. On your own daughter. You are a stranger to us right now," she said, and then she slammed the door. I heard the deadbolt slide home. I stood on the welcome mat, a mat that said, "Home Sweet Home" in cheerful cursive, and stared at the wood. They were moving. They hadn't told me. They had lived in this house for 20 years. They hadn't mentioned a sale, a downsizing, nothing. And the bins, there were so many of them. You don't pack like that for a vacation. You pack like that when you are leaving and never coming back. I walked back to Chloe's car. I felt hollowed out, scraped clean of any emotion except a cold, vibrating shock. "She didn't let you in?" Chloe asked, watching my face. "No," I said. "She threatened to call the cops." Chloe's mouth fell open. "Jesus. Hazel, I'm so sorry. Just drive," I said. "Please." That night, lying on the air mattress in Chloe's living room, I couldn't turn my brain off. The shadows in the room looked like smoke. The sound of a car passing outside sounded like the roar of the fire. I pulled out my phone. I needed to understand. I opened the message thread with my mother. I scrolled back. Me. October 14th. "Hey, Mom. Thinking of coming by this weekend. Maybe dinner, Mom." October 15th. "Not a good time. Dad is busy." A 24-hour delay in response. Me. September 2nd. "I need a ride to the mechanic to pick up my car." "Are you guys around, Mom?" September 2nd, 3 hours later. "No? Ask a friend." I kept scrolling back. Years back. I looked for the moments where I had asked for something: advice, help, presence. July 2024. "I'm sick. Think it's food poisoning. Can you bring me some Gatorade?" Mom. July 2024. 5 hours later. "We are out of town." I looked at the timestamp of that message. 5 p.m. I remembered that day. I had seen my father's Facebook status update at 6 p.m. He had checked into a restaurant 10 minutes from my apartment. They weren't out of town. I looked at a message from 3 years ago. I had been short on rent after a medical bill. I had asked for a loan of $200. Me. "I promise I'll pay you back next week. I just need to cover the gap." The reply had come 6 hours later. Mom. "Your father says no. You need to learn responsibility." 6 hours. I started to see it. A rhythm, a cadence. Every time I asked for help, there was a delay, a pause. It was as if they couldn't answer me immediately, as if they had to check with someone else first. And the language. It was always "we," or "your father says." But the tone was clinical. I looked at the last message, the one from yesterday, before the fire. Me. "Just checking in. Haven't heard from you guys in a while." There was no reply. I thought about the bins in the hallway. I thought about the fire marshal saying the door frame looked weird. I thought about Mr. Henderson shouting about the alarms, and I thought about my mother's eyes through the crack in the door. She hadn't looked sad. She hadn't looked worried. She had looked afraid, not for me, but of me. I put the phone down on the floor. I was alone, truly, completely alone, but for the first time since I woke up to the smell of smoke. I wasn't just scared, I was suspicious, and suspicion, I realized as I stared at Chloe's ceiling, was a much better fuel than grief. It burned hotter, and it lasted longer. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I just listened to the silence, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I had a feeling it was going to be a heavy one. 2 days after the fire, I met the man who would dismantle my life in order to understand it. His name was Grant Ellison, and he was a county fire investigator. We met in a small, sterile interview room at the local fire station. a space that smelled aggressively of lemon cleaner and old coffee. He was not what I expected. I had anticipated someone gruff, soot-stained, loud. Grant was quiet. He was a man of sharp angles and precise movements, wearing a pressed gray button-down shirt that seemed immune to wrinkles. He had the eyes of a watchmaker, constantly assessing the tension of springs and gears behind the surface of things. "Please, sit down, Ms. Ross," he said, gesturing to a metal chair on the other side of a scratched laminate table. I sat. My body felt heavy, a dull ache settling into my bones. I was wearing clothes Chloe had bought me from a discount store the night before, jeans that were too stiff and a sweater that was too large. I felt like a child playing dress-up in a tragedy. "I know you have told your story to the police and the initial responders," Grant said, opening a thick file folder. "I need you to tell it again. To me. Start from the moment you woke up." I went through it. The smell, the alarm, the heat, the way the hallway looked like a throat-swallowing smoke. Grant listened without interrupting. He did not nod. He did not offer sympathetic noises. He just watched my mouth moving, his pen hovering over a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he let the silence stretch for a long 10 seconds. "You mentioned the door frame," he said finally. "When you went back for your things?" "Yes," I said. "It looked different. The wood wasn't as burned as the rest of the hall." Grant made a note, a single check mark. "Miss Ross, I am going to ask you some questions that might feel personal. They might feel accusatory. They are not. Fire is a chemical reaction, but arson is a human behavior. To understand the fire, I have to understand the humans. Fire doesn't lie. People do." I stiffened. "Arson. The official cause is currently undetermined," he said, his voice even. "But undetermined is just a placeholder. It means the puzzle pieces are messy. So, let us talk about you. Did you have conflicts with anyone in the building?" "No," I said. I kept to myself. "Any disputes with the landlord? Late rent, eviction notices?" "Never," I said. "I paid on the 1st of the month, every month." "What about personal relationships? An ex-boyfriend with a temper? A family member you are estranged from?" I thought of my mother's face in the crack of the door. "Not our problem. No," I lied. "My family life is quiet." Grant looked at me. It was a look that made me feel like he could see the text messages on my phone without touching it. "We checked the insurance records for the building," he said, "and we are checking the tenant policies. Did you make any changes to your renter's insurance recently?" I shook my head. "No. I set it up 3 years ago on autopay. I haven't touched it." "Are you sure I'm positive?" I said. "Why would I change it?" Grant tapped the pen against the table. A slow, rhythmic sound. "Usually, when people anticipate a loss, they increase their coverage," he said. "They insure the jewelry they don't own. They inflate the value of their electronics. It creates a motive. I don't have a motive," I said, my voice rising. "I lost everything. I am sleeping on an air mattress." "I believe you," Grant said. Though his tone suggested belief was a variable he was still calculating. "But I need you to verify your policy details. Sometimes, anomalies go the other way." He stood up, signaling the end of the interview. "Don't leave town, Ms. Ross," he said. I almost laughed. It would have been a hysterical, broken sound. "I don't have a car," I said. "I don't have anywhere to go." Grant's question about the insurance gnawed at me. I sat in a coffee shop 2 blocks from my office, using the free Wi-Fi because I didn't want to go back to Chloe's apartment yet. I didn't want to feel like a burden. I had an hour before I had to be at work, and the dread of facing my colleagues was making my stomach turn. I logged into my email. My inbox was a disaster of sympathy messages from people I barely spoke to, automated alerts from bills I needed to update, and spam. I typed the name of my insurance provider into the search bar. Safe Harbor Insurance, the list populated. Payment processed, October. Payment processed, September. Policy update. Confirmation, August 24th. I frowned. August 24th. That was 2 months ago. I didn't remember updating anything in August. I clicked on the email. "Dear Hazel Ross, This email confirms the changes made to your renter's insurance policy number 994-221 per your request. Your personal property coverage has been reduced from $30,000 to $5,000. Your liability coverage remains unchanged. Your new monthly premium is $12.50. I stared at the screen. The numbers swam before my eyes. $5,000. That wouldn't cover my laptop and my work clothes, let alone furniture, books, kitchenware, and the life I had accumulated over a decade. I scrolled down. Request made via telephone customer service. My hands started to shake. I knocked my coffee cup, sending a splash of lukewarm latte onto the table. But I didn't wipe it up. I dialed the customer service number at the bottom of the email. The automated system was a labyrinth of menus. Press 1 for claims, press 2 for policy changes. Finally, a human voice. Safe Harbor Insurance. This is Kevin. How can I help you? I need to know who changed my policy. I said. My voice was tight, breathless. I am looking at an email from August 24th lowering my coverage. I did not authorize this. One moment. Ms. Ross, let me pull up the file. I heard the clicking of a keyboard. The cafe noise around me, the grinder, the indie folk music. The chatter faded into a dull roar. Okay, I see the change here, Kevin said. It was processed on August 24th at 2:15 in the afternoon. Who called, I asked. It was a phone request. Kevin said. The caller identified themselves as the policyholder. It wasn't me. I said, I was at work. I can prove it. Kevin's voice took on a practiced, defensive edge. Ms. Ross, the caller verified the account. We have strict security protocols. What protocols? I demanded. What did they have to say to authorize a policy change over the phone? The caller must provide the full account number, the date of birth, and the answers to 2 security questions. I gripped the phone. What questions? Kevin hesitated. I cannot reveal the answers on file, obviously, but the questions asked were, let me see. What is your mother's maiden name, and what was the name of the street you grew up on? I felt the blood drain from my face, and they answered them correctly. I whispered, yes, ma'am. The caller provided the correct answers. The change was authorized immediately. I hung up. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't ask to reinstate the policy. I just lowered the phone and stared at the dark screen. My mother's maiden name. The street I grew up on. These were not difficult questions for a stranger to guess if they were a dedicated identity thief. You could find my mother's maiden name on a genealogy site. You could find my childhood address in public records. But the timing and the specific nature of the change. A thief doesn't lower your insurance coverage. A thief steals your credit card number. A thief takes out a loan in your name. Lowering coverage is an act of sabotage. It is a strategic move to ensure that when disaster strikes, the victim is left with nothing. It wasn't a stranger. I thought of the storage bins in my parents' hallway. I thought of the rehearsed coldness in my mother's voice. Not our problem. They knew. The realization made me feel like I was falling. They knew the fire was coming, or they knew something was coming that would require a claim, and they wanted to make sure I didn't get a payout. But why I needed to do something, I needed to act, because if I stopped moving, the horror of what I was thinking would paralyze me. I called the property management company, Skyline Management. I need to speak to someone about the relocation funds. I said when the receptionist answered, I know you sent an email, but I need to understand the timeline. I'm transferring you to Luis in accounts. She said. Luis sounded harried. I could hear phones ringing in the background. Ms. Ross, look, I can't give you a different answer than the email, he said, sounding exhausted. The owner's rep is being very specific about this. No payouts until the insurance clears liability. The owner's rep, I asked. Who is that? I don't know the name. Luis said. We deal with a liaison. But look, between you and me, they are pushing hard on this. They want the building cleared and the insurance claims settled yesterday. Why the rush? I asked. Renovations, Luis said, his voice dropping. He sounded like a man who enjoyed gossiping about his bosses. They've been trying to get the permits to gut that building for 6 months. The Historical Society was blocking them because of the facade. But now, well, fire damage changes the code requirements. He paused, realizing he might have said too much. Anyway, I'm just saying, they are motivated to move fast, but that means they are going to be sticklers on the liability. If the fire department says it was tenant negligence, you guys get nothing, so sit tight. He hung up. I sat there, my mind racing. Renovations, value increase, a building that was worth more as a shell than as a home, and someone who wanted to make sure I couldn't fight back. Work was a nightmare. I walked into the office 10 minutes late. I was a project coordinator for a mid-sized logistics firm. Usually, I was invisible. I liked being invisible. I did my work. I organized the spreadsheets. I went home. Today, I was a spectacle. As I walked to my cubicle, heads turned, conversations stopped mid-sentence. I could feel their eyes on my borrowed clothes. I could feel them looking for the soot marks. My manager, a woman named Karen who measured her self-worth by how many people she could make cry in a week, called me into her office immediately. "Hazel," she said, not looking up from her monitor. "Close the door." I closed it. "I heard about your situation," she said. "It is unfortunate." "Thank you," I said. "However," she continued, finally swiveling her chair to face me, "we have the Q4 review coming up. I need to know if this personal issue is going to impact your output." I stared at her. My apartment had burned down 48 hours ago. I was wearing shoes that pinched my toes. "I am here." "Karen," I said, "I am working." "Good," she said, "because I noticed you were late, and I have heard chatter. People are talking." "Hazel, there is a sense that perhaps you are bringing the drama into the office. I heard you on the phone in the break room yesterday, crying. I was calling the Red Cross." I said, my voice trembling. "Do it on your lunch break." She said, "We need you to stay professional. We are not a therapy center. If you can't handle the workload, let me know so I can reassign your accounts." She turned back to her screen. I walked back to my desk. My face was burning. As I sat down, I heard a whisper from the cubicle behind me. Heard she didn't even have insurance. Who does that? Probably looking for a GoFundMe payout. You know how she is. Quiet ones are always the weirdest. I typed my password wrong 3 times. I locked myself out of the system. I had to call IT to reset it, and while I waited for them to answer, I sat there and stared at a spreadsheet of shipping containers, fighting the urge to scream until my throat bled. They thought I was dramatic. They thought I was exaggerating. I was being erased. My reality was being rewritten by people who found my tragedy inconvenient. I left work at 5. I didn't go back to Chloe's. I went to a nonprofit legal aid clinic downtown. Chloe had found the number for me. The waiting room was full of people who looked tired. A woman with a crying baby. A man with a cast on his arm. I waited for 2 hours. When I finally got to see an attorney, it was a young man named David who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He listened to me for 10 minutes. He took notes on a yellow pad, just like Grant Ellison had. "So," David said, leaning back, "you think your parents lowered your insurance and you think the building owner burned the place down for renovations, put like that. It sounded insane. It sounded like the plot of a bad movie." "I know how it sounds," I said, "but the security questions, only they would know, and the bins in their hallway." David sighed. He rubbed his eyes. "Hazel, listen to me. I am on your side, but I have to be a realist. You have no proof. I have the email." I said, "You have an email showing a change. You don't have proof of who made the call. And regarding the building, landlords are greedy. Yes, but accusing a property management firm of arson without hard evidence, that is dangerous." Why, I asked. "Because right now, you are a victim," David said. "But if you start throwing around accusations you can't prove, the narrative shifts. You become the unstable tenant who is spiraling after a trauma. You become the liability." He leaned forward. "If the fire investigator rules it as arson, that is one thing. But until then, keep your head down, document everything, but do not confront anyone, especially not your parents. If they are involved, and that is a massive if confronting them gives them time to cover their tracks. He handed me a pamphlet about tenant rights. I am sorry. Hazel, I wish I could do more, but without a smoking gun. We are just telling ghost stories. I took the bus back toward the burnt apartment building. I don't know why. I felt drawn to it. It was the only place that felt real. The street was quiet. The yellow police tape fluttered in the wind. The smell was still there, a pungent reminder of what had happened. I stood on the sidewalk across the street, looking up at the blackened hole where my window used to be. Hey, I jumped. A man was standing a few feet away, smoking a cigarette. It was the guy from 2B, the one who played loud video games at night. I think his name was Marcus. Oh, I said, hi. You okay? He asked. He looked rough. He was wearing a hoodie that had burn holes in it, probably from embers. I'm alive. I said. Yeah, Marcus said. He took a drag. Crazy. Right, yeah. You know, it's weird, he said, exhaling smoke. What is I saw a guy? My heart skipped a beat. A guy? When last Tuesday, Marcus said. 3 days before the fire. I was coming back from a late shift. Around 2 a.m., I saw a maintenance van parked in the alley. You know, by the basement door. I nodded. The basement held the electrical panels and the tenant storage cages. I thought it was weird because management always sends emails when they do maintenance, Marcus said, and usually they do it during the day. But this guy, he was carrying those big red jugs, like for gas or chemicals. Did you see his face? I asked. Stepping closer? Nah, he had a hat on, but he had a limp, or a weird walk, favoring his left leg. I stared at him. A limp. Did you tell the police? I asked. Marcus shrugged. I told the cop who took my statement. He wrote it down, but he looked at me like I was high. I mean, I have a record. You know, they don't listen to people like me. I listen to him. Thank you. Marcus, I said. He flicked his cigarette butt into the gutter. Good luck. Hazel, we're gonna need it. I walked back to the corner to wait for my ride. My head was spinning. A maintenance worker with a limp, red jugs, 2 a.m. I needed help. I needed someone to tell me I wasn't crazy. I took my phone out. I stared at the contact named Dad. My father was a weak man. I knew this. He was a man who drifted in the current of my mother's will. He was not malicious. I had always thought, just passive. Maybe, if I could get him alone, maybe he would crack. Maybe he would explain why there were bins in the hallway. I dialed. It rang 4 times. Hello? His voice was gruff, guarded. Dad? I said, it's Hazel. Don't hang up. Please. Hazel, he said. He sounded tired. We talked about this. I am not asking for money, I said, making my voice soft. I am not asking for a place to stay. I promise. Then what do you want? I just need help with my documents. Dad, my birth certificate was in the fire. I need copies. I need to know the name of the hospital I was born in so I can file for a replacement. And I need to know I still have a father. There was a silence on the line. I could hear him breathing. I could hear the faint hum of the television in the background. Hazel. He started. His voice wavered. Look, it's complicated. What is complicated? I asked. Why won't Mom let me in the house? Why are you guys packing? I heard a rustle. A sharp intake of breath. Then, faint but distinct, I heard another voice. It was not my mother's voice. It was deeper. Male. Tell her to stop calling. Tell her now. My blood froze. Dad, I whispered. Who is that? My father cleared his throat. The softness was gone. It was replaced by a rigid, panicked obedience. You need to handle your own mess. Hazel, he said, stop digging for handouts. Grow up. Dad, I heard him. Who is with you? Do not call here again, he said. The line went dead. I stood on the street corner, the wind whipping my hair across my face. It wasn't just my mother. It wasn't just a renovation. There was a man in my parents' house, a man who gave orders, a man who told my father what to say. I looked at the phone. I looked at the dark, burned-out shell of my building. Grant Ellison was right. Fire didn't lie, but everyone else did. and I was beginning to realize that the lies were the only thing holding my family together. I put the phone in my pocket. I stopped crying. The tears felt useless now. They felt like a waste of water. I needed to find Grant Ellison. I needed to tell him about the insurance. I needed to tell him about the man with the limp. And I needed to find out who was standing in my parents' living room, telling them to cut their daughter loose. I started walking. I didn't wait for Chloe. I just walked, the sound of my cheap shoes hitting the pavement in a steady, angry rhythm. I was done being sad. I was ready to be the unstable tenant they were so afraid of. The fluorescent lights in Grant Ellison's office hummed with a sound that felt like a migraine waiting to happen. It was 3 days since our last meeting, and the air between us had shifted. It was no longer just an interview. It was a briefing. Grant laid 3 photographs on the desk between us. They were glossy, high-resolution images of destruction. "Look at this," he said, tapping the first photo with a pen. I leaned in. It was a picture of a wall in the basement. Near where the tenant storage cages used to be, the wood was charred black, but there was a distinct pattern, a deep, V-shaped scorch mark that flared upward, widening as it rose. "We call this a V pattern," Grant explained, his voice low and clinical. "Fire moves up and out. The bottom of the V points to the source of ignition." He slid the second photo over the first. This one showed a blackened electrical junction box, a tangle of melted wires and fused plastic. "The landlord's report claims the fire started here," Grant said. "An electrical short in the main panel. Old wiring. An accident." He looked at me, waiting for me to catch up, but I asked, "But look at the floor," he said, pointing to the third photo. The floor beneath the junction box was concrete. It was stained with a dark, irregular blotch that looked like spilled ink. The concrete itself was spalled, chipped, and cracked from intense, localized heat. "Electrical fires start in the wires," Grant said. "They arc and spark and catch surrounding material. They do not typically burn hot enough to spall concrete on the floor directly beneath them unless something dropped. And if you look at the char depth on the studs—" He paused, his eyes locking onto mine. "The burn is too deep. Hazel, too fast. An accidental electrical fire smolders first. It takes time to build. This fire got very hot, very quickly. That happens when you introduce a fuel load, an accelerant." I felt a cold shiver ripple through me. Despite the stuffy heat of the office, someone poured something I asked. Grant nodded slowly. "We found traces of heavy petroleum distillates near that junction box, and a second point of origin near the service entrance. This was not an accident. It was a setup designed to look like a maintenance failure." I stared at the photos. I thought about Marcus, my neighbor, smoking his cigarette and telling me about the man with the limp and the red jugs. "I need to tell you something," I said. "A neighbor saw someone." I told him about Marcus, about the van in the alley at 2 a.m, about the figure carrying containers. Grant listened, his face unreadable, but I saw a flicker of interest when I mentioned the time. 2 a.m, he repeated. "That is consistent with the burn timeline. But here is the problem." He turned his computer monitor toward me. It showed a grid of black squares. The building had 4 security cameras. Grant said, "Front lobby, rear exit, laundry room, and the alleyway service entrance." I waited. "They were all offline," he said. "The management company claims a server malfunction wiped the drive at midnight. Conveniently, 2 hours before your neighbor saw the van." "They erased it," I asked. "It looks like a loop error," Grant said. "But loop errors usually leave fragments. This drive was scrubbed clean. It was reformatted. That is not a malfunction. That is a keystroke." He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. "I can prove arson. Hazel, the chemistry doesn't lie. But proving who lit the match, that requires eyes. I need you to think. Did anyone else on the block have cameras, ring doorbells, dash cams? I thought about the street. It was a mix of old apartments and small businesses. There is a convenience store on the corner," I said. "Sal's Market. It's about 50 yards down, but it faces the alley entrance. Check it," Grant said. "If they have footage, get it. Do not tell them why. Just get it. Sal's Market was a cramped bodega that smelled of floor cleaner and spicy chips. I had bought milk there 100 times. The owner, a man named Sal, who always wore a stained apron, was behind the counter counting lottery tickets. I walked in. I was still wearing the same jeans Chloe had lent me, washed once in her sink. I felt like a ghost haunting my own neighborhood. "Hey, Sal," I said. He looked up, his eyes widening. "Hazel, I heard about the building. Man, that's terrible. You okay? I'm getting by." I said, "Listen, Sal, my insurance company is giving me a hard time about my car. They say I wasn't parked where I said I was." I lied easily. It scared me how easily the lie came. "I was wondering if your outside camera caught the street," I asked. "Just so I can prove I was parked in the lot on Tuesday night." Sal scratched his chin. "Tuesday, the night of the fire." "Yeah," I said. He tapped the monitor of his security system. "I keep a 7-day loop. Let me check." He turned the screen. It was grainy, black and white footage. "What time?" he asked. "Around 2 in the morning." I said. He scrolled the timestamp back. 020000. The street was empty. A cat ran across the sidewalk. A car drove past, its headlights flaring in the lens. "Wait," I said. "Pause it." Sal hit the spacebar. At the very top edge of the frame, capturing the entrance to the alley behind my building. There was movement. It was blurry. The street lamp was flickering. But there was a figure, a person wearing dark clothing, a hood pulled up. They were walking toward the service entrance. "Can you zoom in?" I asked. Sal squinted. "It's cheap tech." "Hazel, it gets pixelated." He zoomed. The figure was a blob of gray pixels. But in their right hand, they were carrying something heavy, a rectangular shape. It looked like a gas can, and the walk, even in the grainy footage. I could see the gait. Step, dip, step, the left leg dragged slightly. "Keep playing," I whispered. The figure disappeared into the alley. Sal let the video run. 10 minutes passed on the timestamp. 02:14:00. The figure emerged. They were not running. They were walking. Calmly. They stopped at the mouth of the alley, looked left, looked right, and then walked away, disappearing off the edge of the screen. They didn't look back. "Can I get a copy of this?" I asked, my voice trembling. Sal looked at me. He looked at the screen. He wasn't stupid. "Insurance? Huh," he said. "Please, Sal." He pulled a USB drive from a drawer. "I'll burn it for you, but keep me out of it." I took the drive to Chloe's apartment. Her boyfriend, Mark, was a video editor for a local production company. He had the software. We sat in front of his dual monitor setup, the glow of the screens illuminating our anxious faces. Mark loaded the file. He ran a filter to sharpen the edges. He adjusted the contrast. "Okay," Mark said. "This is as good as it gets." The figure was still faceless, hidden by the hood, but the object in the hand was undeniable. It was a red plastic container, the kind you buy at a hardware store for $5, and the timestamp. They left the alley at 2:14 in the morning. Mark said. I looked at the notes Grant had given me. The first alarm had tripped at 2:30. They lit the fuse and walked away. I said, "They gave it 15 minutes to catch." Mark pointed at the screen. "Look at the way he is holding the can on the way out." I looked. On the way in, the arm was straight, weighted down. On the way out, the container was swinging lightly. It was empty, Mark said. He poured it all. I felt sick. It was one thing to know it was arson. It was another to watch the arsonist walk away with a casual, limping stroll, knowing that in 15 minutes, my life would be incinerated. "Can you email this to the fire investigator?" I asked. "Done," Mark said. The next morning, I woke up to a phone call. It wasn't Grant. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Hello," I answered, sitting up on the air mattress. "Ms. Ross, this is Linda from You Store It?" I blinked, clearing the sleep from my eyes. I had a small storage unit on the other side of town where I kept winter clothes and old college textbooks. "Hi, Linda. Is everything okay?" "Well, not really," she said. "We tried to process your monthly auto pay, but it was declined. The bank flagged it as a security mismatch, and when we tried to mail you the invoice, It was returned. Returned, I asked. My billing address is the apartment. I know the apartment burned down, but I have mail forwarding set up to my parents' house. No, Linda said. The address we have on file was changed last week. Changed to what? She read out an address. 1400 Commerce Way, Suite 404. I grabbed a pen from Chloe's coffee table. I didn't authorize that change. I said, well, it was done through the online portal. Linda said, someone logged in with your password. I hung up and immediately opened my banking app. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. I went to the profile section. Current address, 1400 Commerce Way, Suite 404. I checked my credit card account. Same address. I checked my cell phone billing. Same address. Someone hadn't just lowered my insurance. They had hijacked my digital identity. They were rerouting my life to a location I had never seen. I Googled the address. It wasn't an apartment. It wasn't a house. It was a strip mall, pack and ship, a private mailbox rental center. I got dressed. I put on the same dirty sneakers. I felt a cold, hard rage replacing the fear. I took 3 buses to get to the strip mall. It was in a rundown part of the city, next to a payday loan shop and a vape store. I walked into the pack and ship. A teenager with green hair was behind the counter, looking at his phone. Hi, I said. I need to ask about Suite 404. He looked up, bored. You got a key, no? I said, I want to know who rents it. Can't tell you that. Lady, privacy policy. My name is on the mail going to it. I said, slamming my ID onto the counter. Hazel Ross. Look. He glanced at the ID. Then he typed something into his computer. Yeah. Hazel Ross is listed as an authorized recipient. He said, but the box owner is a business. What business? I demanded. He shrugged. He turned the screen slightly. Vantage Point Holdings, LLC. Vantage Point Holdings. I wrote it down. Who signed for it? I asked. The kid sighed. Look, I shouldn't show you this, but you look like you're having a bad day. He pulled a paper form from a binder under the counter. Here. The registration form. I looked at the signature at the bottom. It was a scrawl, illegible, but the contact name printed neatly above it stopped my heart. Arthur Sterling. I stared at the name. The letters seemed to swim. Arthur Sterling. I knew him. I had known him my entire life. We didn't call him Arthur. We called him Uncle Artie. He wasn't my real uncle. He was my father's best friend from college. He was the man who came to every 4th of July barbecue. He was the man who gave me a savings bond when I graduated high school. He was a real estate developer, a man who bought distressed properties and flipped them. He was the man who stood in my parents' kitchen and drank wine while my mother complained about the neighbors. And he was the man who was currently receiving my mail at a Shell Company mailbox. I walked out of the store. The sunlight felt too bright. The world felt tilted, like the floor of a funhouse. I sat on the curb and pulled out my phone. I searched Vantage Point Holdings, LLC, on the Secretary of State's business search. It was registered 3 months ago. Registered agent Arthur Sterling. Business address, 1400 Commerce Way. I scrolled down to the filing history. There was one other name listed as a managing member, Robert Ross, my father. I put the phone between my knees and put my head in my hands. I couldn't breathe. My father wasn't just being controlled. He was a partner. That evening, there was a charity gala at the Botanic Gardens. I knew about it because my mother had been talking about it for months. It was the social event of the season. The Autumn Ball. Tickets were $500 a plate. Arthur Sterling was on the board of directors. I shouldn't have gone. I had no ticket. I had no dress. I looked like a vagrant, but I went. I stood outside the wrought iron gates, watching the luxury cars pull up. I saw women in silk gowns and men in tuxedos. I watched the valet park Mercedes and BMWs. I waited in the shadows near the catering entrance. I saw him, Arthur Sterling. He was standing near the fountain in the courtyard, holding a champagne flute, laughing with a group of people. He looked tan, healthy, rich. I slipped past a catering van while the guards were checking a delivery manifest. I walked onto the gravel path. I didn't blend in. In my jeans and oversized sweater, I stood out like a burn mark on white linen. People stared. A woman clutched her pearl necklace. I walked straight toward Arthur. "Uncle Artie," I said. He turned. His smile froze. It didn't fade. It just solidified into a mask. "Hazel," he said. His voice was too loud, too jovial. "Good Lord. Look at you. What are you doing here? I need to talk to you," I said, "about Vantage Point Holdings." The color drained from his face instantly. He grabbed my elbow. His grip was hard, painful. "Not here," he hissed. He steered me away from the fountain, toward a secluded alcove near the rose garden. "Are you out of your mind?" he whispered, his face inches from mine. "You cannot be here." "Why is my mail going to your shell company?" I asked. "Why is my father's name on the LLC?" Arthur looked around frantically. He let go of my arm and smoothed his tuxedo jacket. "You are confused. Hazel, you are traumatized. The fire has messed with your head. Don't gaslight me." I said, "I saw the registration. I saw the mailbox." Arthur sighed. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a silver money clip. He peeled off a stack of bills. "Hundreds. Hazel, listen to me. Your parents. We are trying to help you. We are setting up a trust. That is what the LLC is for, to manage assets for your future." "My future?" I asked. "You burned down my apartment." "Keep your voice down," he snapped. He thrust the money at me. "Here, take this. Go get a hotel room. Buy some clothes. Stop digging into things you don't understand. If you keep scratching at this, you are going to get an infection." Do you understand me? He wasn't offering charity. He was paying for silence. I didn't take the money. I looked at his eyes. They were cold. They were the eyes of a man who looked at a building full of people and saw only a spreadsheet. "Where is the man with the limp?" "Arthur," I asked. "The one with the red gas can." Arthur flinched. A genuine, physical recoil. "Go home." "Hazel," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "before you lose more than just your apartment." He turned and walked back toward the party. I stood in the dark garden, the smell of roses cloying and sweet, barely masking the rot of the mulch beneath. I called Grant Ellison from the bus stop. I told him everything: the mailbox, the LLC, Arthur Sterling, my father's name on the documents, the confrontation. Grant listened. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, there was a long silence. "Hazel, listen to me very carefully," he said. His tone frightened me more than Arthur's threat. "You need to stop playing detective," he said, "not because you are wrong, but because you are walking into a trap." "What do you mean?" "Think about it," Grant said. "Your address was changed to a box you don't control. Your insurance was lowered to make it look like you didn't value your property. You are being seen on cameras arguing with people. So if this goes south, Hazel, if the police get involved, who does it look like I didn't answer?" "It looks like you," Grant said. "It looks like you set up the mailbox to hide correspondence. It looks like you lowered the insurance to reduce suspicion before setting the fire for a payout or revenge. They are stealing your identity. Yes, but they are using it to build a paper trail that points back to you." I felt the blood leave my head. "They are framing me," I whispered. "They are building a patsy," Grant said. "A fallback plan. If the arson is discovered, they can claim the unstable daughter did it. The daughter who was estranged. The daughter who had financial troubles. My father," I said. "My father wouldn't do that." Grant's voice was soft. "Your father is a partner in the LLC. Hazel." He signed the papers. I hung up. I couldn't go back to Chloe's. I couldn't face her normal, happy life. I couldn't sit on her air mattress and pretend I was just a victim of bad luck. I walked into a 24-hour laundromat on 4th Street. It was empty, save for a man sleeping in the corner. The fluorescent lights buzzed. A harmony to the hum in my head. I stripped off my sweater. I stripped off the jeans. I sat there in my underwear and the oversized t-shirt I had worn out of the fire. I put the clothes in a machine. I poured in the soap. I put in the quarters. I watched the water fill the drum. It turned gray instantly. The soot, the ash, It was still in the fabric. I sat on the plastic bench and watched the clothes spin, round and round. I thought about my grandmother's letter, the one lost in the fire. Trust what you see, not what they say. I saw my mother packing bins. I saw my father's name on a fraudulent business document. I saw Arthur Sterling holding a glass of champagne while I stood in the dirt. I realized then that the fire hadn't taken my family from me. The fire had just turned on the lights. My family had been gone for a long time. Maybe they had never been there at all. Maybe I had just been an asset they were waiting to liquidate. I pulled my knees to my chest and started to cry. Not the loud, sobbing cry of the shelter. This was a quiet, leaking grief. It was the sound of a foundation cracking. I was alone. The washer entered the spin cycle, vibrating the floor beneath my feet. I let the vibration travel up my spine. If they wanted a fight, I thought, wiping my nose with the back of my hand, if they wanted to make me the villain, then I would show them what happens when you burn the wrong witch. I watched the clothes spin, faster and faster, until they were just a blur of color. I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to hide. I was going to burn it all down. But this time, I would be the one holding the match. The cycle ended. The machine beeped. A cheerful, electronic sound in the dead of night. I stood up to dry my clothes. The notification arrived on a Tuesday morning, pinging my phone with the harmless chime I usually associated with coupon emails or weather alerts. I was sitting on the floor of the laundromat again. Not because I had more laundry, but because it was warm, it had Wi-Fi. And nobody asked me why I had been staring at the same legal pad for 2 hours. I opened the email. The subject line was stark: Notice of Lease Violation and Liability Assessment. Unit 3C. It was from Skyline Property Management. Dear Ms. Ross, following the preliminary investigation into the fire event at 440 Oak Street, we have received sworn witness testimony indicating that you were storing prohibited hazardous materials within your residential unit. Specifically, Class B flammable liquids and accelerants, in violation of Clause 14 of your lease agreement. Management has been informed that you were in possession of significant quantities of fuel and industrial solvents. As such, Skyline Management reserves the right to hold you personally liable for damages to the structure extending beyond your security deposit. We are forwarding this information to the insurance adjusters and local authorities. Governing law tenant negligence regarding hazardous storage negates landlord liability for relocation costs. I read it 3 times. The words swam before my eyes, reorganizing themselves into a weapon. Fuel industrial solvents. I didn't own a car. I didn't paint. I didn't do woodworking. My apartment contained books, a dying fern, and enough clothes to get me through a work week. I felt a surge of nausea so violent I had to put my head between my knees. They weren't just refusing to help me. They were building a narrative where I was not the victim, but the perpetrator. They were rewriting the story of my life to make me the villain who burned down her own home. I was at Grant Ellison's office 40 minutes later. I didn't call first. I just showed up, breathless and pale, thrusting my phone across his desk before I even sat down. Read this. I said. Grant put on his reading glasses. He read the email slowly. His expression didn't change, but the muscle in his jaw tightened. He set the phone down and looked at me. This is a classic play. Hazel, he said. His voice was calm, which somehow made me want to scream. It is called muddying the water. It is a lie. I said, I don't have fuel. I have never owned fuel. Grant leaned forward, clasping his hands. Listen to me. They don't need it to be true in court. They just need it to be true enough on paper to delay the insurance payout. If they can cast doubt on your credibility, if they can suggest you contributed to the fire load, the insurance company locks the checkbook. It buys them months, and it scares you into silence. But a witness, I asked. Who would say that Grant shrugged? A maintenance man who wants to keep his job, a neighbor who got a discount on their next lease, or maybe they just made it up. But before we dismiss it, I need you to think, is there anything at all in your apartment that could be spun this way? I shook my head. No, I have cleaning supplies, Windex, bleach, that is it. Grant pressed. Think harder. Camping gear, a propane stove, a bottle of lighter fluid for a barbecue you never hosted, a souvenir bottle of high-proof alcohol. I closed my eyes, trying to mentally walk through the rooms that no longer existed, the kitchen under the sink, the hall closet. Then I remembered. The box. Oh, God. I whispered. What Grant asked. 2 weeks ago. I said, my office held a donation drive for a homeless shelter. We were collecting household supplies. I brought a box home because I was going to drop it off at the collection site on Monday. It was in my hallway. What was in the box? Hazel. I tried to visualize the receipt. Cleaning products. I said, large jugs of bleach, ammonia, and those little cans of sterno. For heating food. There was a 12-pack of them. Grant sighed, rubbing his temples. Sterno, he repeated. Jellied fuel. It was for a shelter. I said, my voice rising. It was a donation. To them, Grant said, pointing at the phone. It is a box of accelerants sitting in your hallway. If a maintenance worker saw it when they came in to check a filter, or if a neighbor saw you carrying it in, that is their hook. But that is innocent. I insisted. Innocence is a matter of context, Grant said. And they are stripping away the context. They are taking a box of charity and turning it into an arsonist's toolkit. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the fire station bay below. This confirms one thing, he said without turning around. They are scared. You don't threaten a tenant with a liability suit unless you are trying to bury them. They know we are looking at the burn patterns. They know the accidental electrical fire theory is weak, so they are pivoting to negligent tenant. He turned back to me. Do not reply to that email. Do not defend yourself to them. Anything you say will be twisted. If you say, it was for charity, they will record, tenant admits to possession of fuel. So what do? I asked. I felt small. I felt like I was standing in a room where the walls were slowly moving in. You get a lawyer, Grant said, a real one, and you document every single thing that has happened since that alarm went off. I went back to the legal aid clinic. David, the exhausted attorney, looked even more tired than the last time I had seen him, but when I showed him the email, he woke up. This is aggressive, he said, tapping the paper. This is litigation bait. He pulled out a fresh legal pad. Hazel, we need to build a counter-narrative. If they are going to paint you as reckless, we need to paint you as meticulous. We need a timeline for the next 3 hours. We sat in the cramped cubicle. I pulled up my phone records, my bank statements, my sent emails. We built a chronology of the betrayal. October 12th. I texted my mother about visiting. October 13th. My father called the insurance company allegedly to inquire about policy changes. October 14th. My mother replied to me, saying they were busy. October 24th. I mentioned to my mother that I was going to be out of town for a work conference in November, a trip that was later canceled. October 25th. The request to change my mailing address to the private mailbox was submitted. November 10th. The fire, November 11th. My mother refuses to let me in. The bins are already packed. As we laid it out, the pattern became undeniable. It wasn't just coldness, it was coordination. Every time I gave them a piece of information about my location or my schedule, a piece of my identity was altered within 48 hours. They were using my life as the blueprint for their fraud. It's the connection points that matter, David said, circling the dates. The address change happened the day after you told them you would be away. They thought you wouldn't notice the missing mail because you would be at a conference. They didn't know the conference was canceled. I said, exactly. That was the glitch in their machine. You were supposed to be gone. You were supposed to be out of the state when the fire happened, which would have made you look even guiltier, the tenant who sets a timer or hires a pro and leaves town to establish an alibi. I stared at the timeline. It was a map of premeditation. Who is they? David asked gently. I know you suspect your parents, but your parents don't own the building. Arthur Sterling. I said, the family friend. He owns the shell company that rents the mailbox. He is on the board of the bank that holds the building's mortgage. I looked it up. David stopped writing. Arthur Sterling, the developer. Yes. David let out a low whistle. Okay, now we are swimming with sharks. Sterling is heavy hitter in this county. If he is leveraging your parents... Hazel, this is dangerous. I know. I said, he offered me money to stop. David's head snapped up. He offered you money. Cash. I said, at the gala. He pulled out a roll of hundreds. Did anyone see it? No. We were in the shadows. David tapped the pen against his teeth. We need more than a timeline, he said. We need the smoking gun. We need to prove the forgery. Because if we can prove they faked your signature on that address change, the whole house of cards falls down. I left the clinic feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and adrenaline. I was walking toward the bus stop when my phone buzzed. It was a text message. Mom. I stared at the screen. My heart did that stupid, hopeful flutter it always did. A reflex beaten into me by 30 years of seeking approval. Hazel, please call me. We need to talk. We hate to see you struggling like this. I didn't call. I waited. A minute later, another text. We have found a way to help you. We can offer you a loan to get back on your feet. Please check your email. A loan, not a gift, not a room. A loan. I opened my email app. Subject Family Assistance Agreement. Attached was a PDF. I stood on the street corner, squinting at the small screen. I opened the document. It was 5 pages long. It looked like a standard promissory note. Drafted by a lawyer. Lenders Robert and Susan Ross. Borrower Hazel Ross. Amount $50,000. $50,000. It was enough to start over. It was enough to move to a new city. Buy a car. Rent a nice apartment. It was a lifeline. I scrolled down. The terms were standard low interest. Deferred repayment for 1 year. And then I reached Clause 14. Confidentiality and non-disparagement. As a condition of this agreement, the borrower agrees to maintain strict confidentiality regarding all family financial matters and agrees to refrain from discussing the events of November 10th, the fire, with any third parties, media outlets, or investigative bodies. Except as legally required by subpoena, the borrower further agrees to withdraw any and all inquiries regarding insurance policy adjustments or mailing address modifications. I read it again. Refrain from discussing. Withdraw any and all inquiries. It wasn't a loan. It was a settlement. It was hush money wrapped in the skin of parental support. I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat, hot and bitter. They were buying me off. My own parents were trying to purchase my silence for $50,000. I hit reply on the email. I didn't type a paragraph. I didn't ask why. I typed one word. No. I hit send. The phone rang 10 seconds later. I answered. Hello. Mother, you ungrateful little brat. Her voice was a shriek. The mask of the concerned mother had vanished so fast it left whiplash. You are trying to ruin us, she screamed. Is that it? Are you happy now? We offer you a hand. We offer to save you from the gutter, and you spit in our faces. I am not in the gutter. Mom, I said, my voice shaking but loud. And I am not ruining you. You are doing that yourselves. We did everything for you, she yelled. We put a roof over your head for 18 years. We fed you. And this is how you repay us. By sniffing around things that don't concern you. By listening to that fire inspector who just wants to make a name for himself, things that don't concern me. I asked. It was my apartment. Mom, it was my identity you stole. You have no idea the pressure we are under, she shouted. Arthur is... She stopped. She caught herself. Arthur is what I pressed. What is Arthur doing to you? Dead silence. Then, a voice cold as ice. If you don't sign that agreement. Hazel, you are dead to us. Do you understand? No money, no contact. When you end up on the street, do not come knocking on our door. I looked at the charred building across the street. I looked at the sky. I already knocked. Mom, I said softly, you didn't open it. I hung up. I blocked the number. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. It felt like amputation. But as I slid the phone back into my pocket, I felt lighter. The hope was gone. And with the hope went the fear of losing them. You cannot lose what you never really had. The next day, Grant called me in again. He looked grim but energized. I got the warrant. He said as soon as I walked in, we pulled the building's full insurance history. He spread a spreadsheet across the desk. Look at this pattern. I looked at the rows of data. 3 years ago, Grant said, there was a claim filed for Unit 1B, minor fire damage, grease fire in the kitchen. Okay, I said. Accidents happen. The claim was denied. Grant said, the insurance company's investigator found that the stove wasn't on. They suspected fraud, but the damage was small, only $4,000, so they didn't pursue criminal charges. They just dropped the policy. And guess who the tenant was in Unit 1B at the time? I looked at the name. Sarah Miller. I don't know her. I said. Grant pulled up a photo. It was a younger woman. She is the niece of Arthur Sterling's wife. Grant said. I stared at the picture. A family connection. It was a test run. Grant said. They tried a small fire to see if they could get a payout. It failed. So they waited 3 years, changed insurance carriers, and decided to go big. They decided to total the building, and they needed a patsy who wasn't family. I whispered, or at least, not family that mattered to Arthur. Exactly. But here's the kicker. Grant pointed to a column on the far right. Policy value. 6 months ago, the building's coverage was increased. The payout for a total loss was raised from $2 million to $5 million. Why, I asked. Renovations. Grant said. They claimed they had done significant upgrades to the HVAC and plumbing, increasing the asset value. Did they? I laughed. The plumbing leaked every time it rained. The HVAC was a radiator from 1950. No. So that is fraud number 2. Grant said. Insurance fraud on the valuation. He sat back. Hazel, we have the motive. We have the method. We have the history. But we are still missing the link that ties the arsonist, the man in the alley, to your father or Sterling. We need to bridge that gap. I nodded. I knew what I had to do. I went to the bank, not my bank, the community bank where the change of address form had been notarized. I had found the stamp on the scanned copy the storage unit lady had sent me. First Merchants Bank, Branch 4. I walked in. It was a quiet afternoon. The air conditioning was humming. I went to the desk of a woman named Joyce. She looked like a grandmother, with reading glasses on a chain and a bowl of candy on her desk. Can I help you? Dear, she asked. I sat down. I put the folded copy of the forgery on her desk. My name is Hazel Ross. I said, someone came in here 2 weeks ago and notarized this document using my name. It wasn't me. Joyce frowned. She picked up the paper. She looked at the notary stamp. That is my stamp, she said. I need you to remember. Joyce, I said, please. Who came in? She squinted. 2 weeks ago, honey. I see 50 people a day. It would have been a woman. I said, maybe older, maybe wearing expensive clothes. Joyce looked at the signature. Wait, she said. I remember this one. You do? Yes, because of the hand. The hand. The woman who signed this. Joyce said, she had a brace on her wrist. Carpal tunnel. Maybe? She complained about it, said it made it hard to write. She took a long time to sign it. She had a piece of paper she was looking at while she did it. A piece of paper like a cheat sheet. Joyce said, she would look at the paper, then write a letter, look at the paper, write a letter. I joked with her. I said, forget how to spell your own name. And she laughed and said, just want it to be neat. I felt a chill. What did she look like? I asked. Joyce pursed her lips. Blonde, styled hair, good coat, camel color. She had big sunglasses on. Said she had a migraine. My mother had a camel coat. My mother was blonde. But the brace. My mother didn't have carpal tunnel, unless she was disguising her handwriting, or unless the brace was a prop to explain why the signature looked shaky. Did she show ID? I asked. Of course, Joyce said. A driver's license. Was it me? I pointed to my face. Joyce looked at me. Then she looked at the air. Remembering, it looked similar. She said, But the hair in the picture was different. And the woman, she seemed older than you. But the ID said Hazel Ross. It was a fake ID. Thank you. Joyce, I said. I walked out of the bank. My mother had walked into a bank, wearing a disguise, and forged my signature. She hadn't just stood by while Arthur did it. She had done it herself. I needed to find the documents. I went back to Chloe's. I dug out the metal lockbox I had saved from the fire. It was the only thing I had left of my past. I sat on the floor and opened it. Inside were my wet, smoky treasures, my passport, my birth certificate, and a blue folder that I hadn't opened in years. I opened it. Inside were report cards, a ribbon from a spelling bee, and a white envelope. To Hazel. Open when you are grown. It was my grandmother's handwriting, my father's mother. She had died when I was 20. She had been a hard woman. A woman who didn't smile much, but she had always looked at me with a strange intensity. I opened the envelope. The paper was yellowed. Dear Hazel, if you are reading this, you are old enough to understand that blood is not always a bond. Sometimes it is just a stain. Your father is a weak man. I loved him, but I broke him. I made him need approval more than he needs air. And he married a woman who eats approval like a wolf eats meat. They will love you as long as you are easy. They will love you as long as you reflect well on them. But the moment you become a problem, they will protect the image, not the child. I am leaving you this note not to scare you, but to arm you. Trust what you see, not what they say. People will tell you they love you while they are locking the door. Watch the hands. Hazel, always watch the hands. Love, Grandma. I stared at the letter. Watch the hands. I thought of the figure in the alley, the limp. I thought of my mother's hand in the bank, the brace. And then I remembered something else. Arthur Sterling didn't have a limp. I had seen him at the gala. He walked fine. But my father had knee surgery 6 months ago. He had been complaining about it for weeks. He favored his left leg when he was tired. Watch the hands, or the legs. I closed the folder. My mother forged the documents. My father carried the gas can. Arthur Sterling pulled the strings. It was a perfect triad. The brain, the hand, and the face. And I was the sacrifice. I put the letter in my pocket. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't sad. I was a camera, recording every detail, every flaw in their performance. I picked up my phone. I dialed Grant. I know who the forger is. I said, and I know who the man in the alley is. Who Grant asked. My mother and my father. I said, are you sure? Grant asked. I told him about the bank. I told him about the knee surgery. Hazel, Grant said, his voice heavy. If this is true, if your father set that fire, he could have killed you. I know. I said, he knew I was in there. He knew I was sleeping, and he lit the match anyway, because to them, I wasn't a daughter. I was an insurance policy with a heartbeat, and policies can be canceled. We need to prove it. Grant said, we need to catch them in the lie. I know how. I said, how the hearing? I said, the investigative hearing is next week. They will all be there. My parents, Arthur, the building reps. Yes, Grant said, I am going to testify. I said, Hazel, they will come for you. Their lawyers will rip you apart. Let them try. I said, I have the one thing they don't have. What is that? I have nothing left to lose. I said. I hung up. I looked at the soot on my hands. I didn't wash it off. I wanted to remember. I was going to the hearing, and I was going to bring the fire with me. The lab report sat on Grant Ellison's desk like a death certificate. It was a single sheet of paper, dense with chemical formulas and timestamps. But the conclusion was simple enough for a child to understand. Grant tapped the paper with his index finger. Positive, he said. I sat across from him, my hands folded tightly in my lap to stop them from shaking. The fluorescent lights of the fire station office hummed, a sound that had become the soundtrack to my nightmare. Positive for what I asked. Heavy petroleum distillates, Grant said. We found residue in the soil near the service entrance alley, which matches the video of the man with the can. But we also found it in the basement, splashed against the wooden support beams under the main stairwell. 2 points of origin, I said. Grant nodded. This was not an accident. Hazel. An accidental fire starts in one place and travels. This fire was planted. It was designed to race up the building's core before the alarms could even register the heat. It was designed to gut the structure. Not just damage it. He looked at me, his eyes grave. Whoever did this wanted a total loss. They did not care if people were sleeping upstairs. They wanted the building to be unrecoverable. I felt a cold nausea settle in my stomach. A total loss. That was the insurance term. A total loss meant the maximum payout. It meant $5 million for the owners, and for the tenants. It meant jumping out of windows or choking to death in hallways. It was premeditated murder that just happened to fail. I whispered. Grant didn't correct me. He just slid the paper back into the file. We have the what, he said. Now we need the who. The world outside the fire station had not stopped turning, but it had become sharper, louder, and more hostile. Later that afternoon, I received a call from a woman named Brenda, who identified herself as the organizer for the Oak Street Survivors Group. I had seen the flyers posted around the neighborhood, bright yellow paper, asking tenants to join a class-action lawsuit. Hazel, Brenda said, her voice breathy and urgent. We are hearing rumors that you have inside information. We are hearing that you are talking to the fire investigator more than anyone else. I am just answering questions, I said, leaning against the wall of the laundromat, which had become my second home. We need you to come to the meeting tonight. Brenda said, we need a face for this lawsuit. Everyone else is scared, or they have moved on, or they took the paltry settlement the management company offered. But your story is different. You lost everything. You are the perfect plaintiff. I closed my eyes. I didn't want to be a plaintiff. I didn't want to be a face. I wanted to be invisible. I can't. Brenda, I said, I can't be on the news. Why not? She pressed. Don't you want justice? I want to survive, I said. And putting my face on a poster makes me a target. I hung up, but the phone rang again almost immediately. I thought it was Brenda calling back, so I answered with a sharp, no, Miss Ross. This isn't Brenda. This is Mark Salinger from the City Chronicle, the press. My stomach dropped. I have no comment, I said, my thumb hovering over the end call button. Wait, Salinger said quickly. I am not looking for a quote about the fire. I am calling to verify some information we received from an anonymous source regarding your financial situation prior to the blaze. I froze. My financial situation. Our source claims that you were in significant debt, Salinger said, that you were desperate for a payout. They claim you had been asking family members for large sums of money in the weeks leading up to the fire and were refused. The narrative being suggested is that this was self-inflicted, a desperate act for insurance money. The air left my lungs. In debt, I had zero debt. I had a savings account. I lived frugally. Asking for money, I thought of the timeline. I had asked my parents for help after the fire. I had asked for documents. I had never asked for money before. Who is your source? I demanded, my voice trembling. I can't reveal that, Salinger said. But they seem to know intimate details of your family history. They mentioned a history of instability. Instability. That was my mother's word. That was the word she used when I cried as a child. That was the word she used when I wanted to go to art school instead of business school. Hazel is so unstable. I didn't do this, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I lost everything. I didn't even have insurance coverage because someone stole it. That is not what the source says, Salinger said. They say you canceled the policy yourself to cash out the premium refund. It was a lie so bold, so intricate, that I almost admired it. They were not just defending themselves. They were flipping the board. They were painting the victim as the villain. I hung up the phone. I looked at the date. It had been exactly 24 hours since I refused my mother's loan agreement. 24 hours since I refused to sign away my voice. This was the punishment. If I wouldn't take the carrot, they would beat me with the stick. I went back to Chloe's apartment. I felt unsafe on the street. I felt like every car passing by was Arthur Sterling. Like every pedestrian was carrying a gas can. Chloe was at work. The apartment was empty. I sat on the air mattress and tried to breathe. I tried to remember who I was before the fire. Hazel Ross, project coordinator, daughter. Now I was Hazel Ross. Suspect, liability, target. A knock on the door made me jump so hard I dropped my phone. I didn't move. Chloe had a key. Nobody else knew I was here. The knock came again, louder, aggressive. Hazel. The voice muffled by the wood was familiar. It was a voice that used to read me bedtime stories, though he usually rushed through them to get back to the television. Dad. I stood up. I walked to the door but didn't open it. I looked through the peephole. My father was standing in the hallway. He looked terrible. His face was gray, his eyes darting around the corridor as if he expected the police to jump out of the potted plants. He was wearing a trench coat that looked too big for him, as if he had shrunk in the wash. Hazel, open the door, he said. We need to talk. How did you find me? I asked through the wood. Your office, he said. I called your office. I told them it was a family emergency. They gave me the address of the coworker you are staying with. Of course, the Concerned Father Act. It worked on everyone. I am not opening the door. Dad, I said, go away. Hazel, please, he pleaded. His voice cracked. It wasn't the voice of the angry man on the phone the other day. It was the voice of the man who let my mother make all the decisions. I just want to talk. Just 5 minutes. Without your mother. Without Arthur. Just us. I hesitated. Just us. That was the trap. The appeal to the bond that didn't exist. But I needed to know. I needed to see his face when I asked him about the limp. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I opened the voice recorder app. I hit the red button. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door, leaving the chain on. He stood there, shifting his weight. I looked down. He was favoring his left leg, just slightly, a subtle shift of balance to keep the weight on the right. What do you want? I asked. Can I come in? He asked. No, I said. Say what you have to say. He licked his lips. He looked sweaty. You have to stop this. Hazel, he whispered. The investigation, the questions. You are making people very nervous. Which people? I asked. Arthur Sterling. He flinched at the name. Arthur is a powerful man. Hazel, you don't understand what you are dealing with. He can destroy you. He is already talking to the press. He is painting you as unwell. I know. I said, I got the call. You and Mom are helping him. Aren't you? You are feeding him the lies. We had no choice. He blurted out. The words hung in the air. No choice about what I asked. About burning down my building, about almost killing me. My father's face crumpled. He looked like he was about to cry. Or vomit. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he said, his voice dropping to a frantic whisper. You were supposed to be away. You told us you had a conference. You were supposed to be in Chicago, so that makes it okay, I asked, my voice rising. If I was in Chicago, it would be fine to burn down the homes of 50 other people. No, he stammered. It was supposed to be a small fire, just enough to trigger the renovation clause. Just the basement. But what I pressed, I held the phone tighter, praying he wouldn't see it. But the plan got out of control, he hissed. The accelerant. It was too strong. The ventilation. It pulled the flames up too fast. Arthur said it would be contained. He promised it would be a minor claim. He stopped. His eyes went wide. He realized what he had just said. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw the horror of recognition. He realized he wasn't talking to his daughter. He was talking to a witness. I didn't mean that, he stammered, backing away. You are twisting my words. You are confused. Hazel, you are always confused. You just said it. Dad, I said, you said the plan got out of control. You said Arthur promised. I said no such thing, he shouted, his face turning red. You are hearing things. This is why you need help. This is why we wanted you to sign the agreement, so we could get you into a clinic. He was gaslighting me in real time, rewriting history 5 seconds after it happened. Get out of here. I said. Hazel, listen to me. Get out, I screamed. I slammed the door. I threw the deadbolt. I slid the chain back. I slumped against the door, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked at my phone. Recording saved. 0412. I had it. I played it back. The audio was clear. The plan got out of control. Arthur said it would be contained. It wasn't a signed confession, but it was the truth, spoken in the panic of a man who knew he was drowning. I played the recording for Grant Ellison an hour later. We were back in his office. He listened to it 3 times. He didn't speak. He stared at the speaker of my phone as if it were an oracle. When it finished the 3rd time, he looked up. It is powerful, he said. But legally it is hearsay. He claims you are confused. He claims you are twisting words. A defense attorney would tear this apart. They would say he was under duress, that he was trying to placate a hysterical daughter. But he admitted it. I cried. He said the plan. Grant held up a hand. I know. Hazel, I believe you, and I know he's guilty. But in court, belief is not enough. However, he leaned forward. This gives me probable cause. This gives me the lever I need to pry open the financial records of Arthur Sterling and your father. The plan got out of control. That implies coordination. That implies a conspiracy. He turned to his computer. I have been digging while you were gone, he said. I followed the money from the Shell LLC Vantage Point Holdings. What did you find? I asked. Vantage Point Holdings has one primary vendor, Grant said, a company called Phoenix Restoration and Recovery. Phoenix. I said, appropriate name for an arsonist. It gets better, Grant said. Phoenix Restoration is owned by a man named Carl Dimmers. Dimmers is a known associate of Arthur Sterling. They have worked together on 4 other properties in the last decade. Let me guess. I said, those properties had fires too. 2 of them did. Grant said, small ones, grease fires, electrical shorts. Phoenix Restoration got the contract to fix them. The insurance paid out. Phoenix overcharged for the repairs, and the money flowed back to Sterling. And my parents. I asked, where do they fit in? Your father is listed as a consultant on the Phoenix payroll. Grant said, he has been receiving monthly payments of $2,000 for the last 5 years. I stared at the screen. $2,000 a month. That was the price of his soul. That was the retainer fee for being a puppet. So it's a triangle, Grant said, sketching it on a notepad. Sterling owns the building and the bank. Dimmers lights the fires and does the cleanup. And your father is the buffer. He is the name on the paperwork. So Sterling's hands stay clean. And I am the scapegoat. I said, yes, Grant said, when they decided to torch this building for the big payout. The renovation flip, they needed a fall guy in case it went wrong. They chose you because you were there, because you are family, because they thought they could control you. They thought wrong. I said. Grant looked at the recording on my phone. This recording connects your father to the plan. The financial records connect your father to Sterling and Dimmers. We are closing the loop. Hazel, what do we do now? I asked. We need one more thing. Grant said, we need to break the weak link. My father, no. Grant said, your father is panicking. He is unstable. If we push him, he might clam up or lawyer up. We need to push the one who thinks she is in control. My mother, exactly. She is the one driving the bus. She is the one forging signatures. She is the one who thinks she is smarter than everyone else. If you can get her to admit why she's doing this, why she sacrificed you, then the jury won't just see a crime. They will see a betrayal. And juries hate betrayal more than they hate arson. I knew where to find her. My mother was a creature of habit. Every Wednesday at 4 o'clock, she went to the salon for a blowout. She would never let a crisis interfere with her hair. I waited in the parking lot of the salon. It was raining a cold, gray drizzle that matched the feeling inside my chest. When she walked out, holding an umbrella, looking perfect and untouched by the ruin she had orchestrated. I stepped out from behind a parked SUV. Mom, she stopped. She didn't jump. She just stiffened. She turned slowly to face me. Hazel, she said, Her voice was ice. I told you. If you didn't sign the agreement, I am not here for money. I interrupted. I am here to ask you why. Why what she asked, checking her watch. I am busy. Hazel. Why me? I asked. Why did you choose me to take the fall? You could have picked a random tenant. You could have blamed it on old wiring. But you stole my identity. You lowered my insurance. You set me up. Why? She looked at me. For a moment, the mask slipped. I saw the exhaustion. I saw the fear. But mostly, I saw a terrifying calculation. We didn't choose you to take the fall. Hazel, she said quietly. We chose you because you were supposed to help. Help, I asked. By burning my apartment. By being part of the family, she hissed. Stepping closer. Her perfume, Chanel No. 5 was overwhelming. Do you have any idea how much debt we are in? Do you know how much money your father lost in the market? Arthur was the only one willing to bail us out. But he needed access. He needed a tenant on the inside. So you sold me to him, I said. We were saving the house, she cried. We were saving our lives if the building renovation went through. We would get a share of the equity. We would be safe. You were supposed to be safe too. You were supposed to be in Chicago. But I wasn't. I said, and when I wasn't, you didn't call to warn me. You let me sleep there. We couldn't call, she said. It would have left a record. We hoped the alarms would wake you. You hoped? I repeated. You wagered my life on a hope. Hazel, grow up. She snapped. This is the real world. Sometimes you have to make hard choices to survive. We raised you. We fed you. We paid for your college. You owe us. You owe us your loyalty. I owe you, I asked. Stunned. I owe you my life. Yes, she said. That is what family is. You sacrifice for each other. But you are so selfish. You always have been. You only care about your little apartment and your little job. You don't care that your parents are drowning. She was serious. In her twisted, warped reality, she was the victim. I was the selfish child who refused to burn to death to pay off her debts. I looked at her. I really looked at her. I saw the lines around her mouth. I saw the desperate tightness of her grip on the umbrella. She wasn't a monster. She was something worse. She was a coward who had convinced herself she was a hero. I don't owe you anything. Mom, I said, not anymore. The fire burned the debt. I turned to walk away. If you talk to the police, she called out, her voice shrill and desperate, you will destroy us. You will send your father to prison. Is that what you want? To be the daughter who put her father in a cage? I stopped. I didn't turn around. He is already in a cage. Mom, I said, you built it for him. I walked away. I heard her shouting my name, but the sound faded into the rain. I went back to the fire station. Grant was waiting. Did you see her? He asked. I nodded. And she thinks she is right, I said. She thinks I am the traitor because I didn't die quietly. Grant looked at me. He saw the wet hair, the pale face, the shaking hands. Are you ready for the next step? He asked. What is the next step? The hearing, Grant said. The formal investigative hearing. It is not a trial, but it is under oath. The insurance investigators will be there. The building owners, your parents, they will all be there. I said, yes, and they will lie. They will present the timeline they built. They will say you were unstable. They will say you were in debt. They will say you had fuel in your apartment. I know. I said, if you testify, Grant said, his voice serious. They will attack you. Their lawyers will dig up every mistake you have ever made. They will shame you. They will try to break you in front of the room. It will be brutal. I looked at the photos on his desk, the burn patterns, the blackened V on the wall, the spot where the fire had started, hungry and manufactured. I thought about the man in the alley with the limp, my father. I thought about the woman in the bank with the fake brace, my mother. I thought about Arthur Sterling offering me a roll of cash in the darkness. They had taken my home. They had taken my memories. They had tried to take my name, but they hadn't taken my voice. I will do it. I said, are you sure? Grant asked. Once you step onto that stand, there is no going back. You will be the girl who testified against her family. That label sticks. Let it stick, I said. I picked up the photo of the burnt hallway. They wanted a fire. I said, I'm going to give them one. Grant nodded. He closed the file. Then get some sleep. Hazel, he said, you are going to need it. I walked out into the rain. I didn't go to the shelter. I didn't go to Chloe's. I went to the site of the building. I stood before the wreckage. The smell was fading now, washed away by the rain and time, but the scar remained. I touched the yellow caution tape. Not our problem, my mother had said. She was wrong. I was their problem now. I was the biggest problem they had ever had. And tomorrow, I was going to be the solution. The hearing took place in a windowless conference room on the 4th floor of the municipal building. It was not a courtroom. There was no judge in a black robe, no jury box, no gallery for spectators. It was an administrative review board, a tribunal of insurance adjusters, fire department officials, and city attorneys gathered around a massive oak table to decide who would pay for the ash that used to be my home. I sat on one side of the table next to David, the legal aid attorney. I was wearing a black blazer I had bought at a thrift store the day before. It smelled faintly of lavender and mothballs, but it was clean. It was armor. Across the table sat the representatives for Skyline Property Management. They were 2 men in expensive blue suits who whispered to each other and checked their watches, and behind them, in a row of chairs against the wall, sat my parents and Arthur Sterling. They looked like strangers. My father was staring at his shoes, his hands clasped so tightly in his lap that his knuckles were white. My mother was sitting with her back ramrod straight, wearing the camel coat she had worn to the bank, her face composed into a mask of tragic dignity. Arthur Sterling looked bored, scrolling through his phone, projecting the air of a man who was doing a favor by merely existing in the room. They did not look at me, not once. The hearing was led by a woman named Commissioner Vance. She had gray hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that looked like they had seen every variety of human deceit. Let us begin, Vance said. Her voice was dry, cutting through the hum of the ventilation system. We are here to determine the liability regarding the structural fire at 440 Oak Street on November 10th. We will hear the report from the fire marshal's office first. Grant Ellison stood up. He didn't look at me either. He looked at his file. He walked to the easel set up at the head of the table and placed a large diagram of the building's floor plan on it. Commissioners, Grant began, his voice steady. The initial report filed by the property management company suggested that the fire originated from an electrical fault in the main junction box in the basement. They cited age of wiring and potential overload. He paused, picking up a laser pointer. The red dot danced on the diagram. However, forensic analysis of the debris tells a different story. He flipped to the next chart. It was the photo of the V pattern on the wall, the same one he had shown me in his office. This is the burn pattern on the north wall of the basement, near the service entrance, Grant said. As you can see, the charring is deep and localized at the base. We tested samples from the concrete floor and the wooden studs. He looked directly at the insurance adjusters. We found heavy petroleum distillates. Specifically, a mixture consistent with commercial-grade kerosene and gasoline. A murmur went through the room. The suits from Skyline stopped whispering. Grant moved the red dot to the center of the diagram. We also found a second point of origin. He continued, here, under the main stairwell, the residue here matches the first sample. He turned to the room. An electrical fire has one origin point. This fire had 2, and they were placed strategically to ensure maximum vertical spread. This was not an accident. This was an incendiary event. It was arson. The word hung in the air like smoke. The lead attorney for Skyline, a man with slicked back hair, cleared his throat. Mr. Ellison, he said, his voice smooth. While arson is a tragic possibility, is it not true that the building had open access? We have had issues with vagrants in the alley. A homeless individual seeking warmth could have started a fire that got out of control. Grant didn't blink. A homeless individual seeking warmth does not typically pour accelerant in 2 distinct locations 50 feet apart, Grant said. And they certainly do not manage to disable the security camera system 2 hours before the event. Disable Commissioner Vance asked, looking up from her notes. The hard drives were wiped. Grant said, reformatted. That requires a password and physical access to the server room. A vagrant does not have administrative privileges. Vance turned her gaze to the Skyline representatives. Who had access to the server room, she asked. The attorney shifted in his seat. Maintenance staff, the building manager, and of course, the owners and the tenants, Vance asked. No, the attorney said. The server room is locked. Vance nodded. She wrote something down. Let us discuss the tenants, she said. Specifically, Ms. Hazel Ross. My heart hammered against my ribs. David squeezed my arm under the table. Ms. Ross, Vance said. Her eyes were not unkind, but they were searching. We have a report here alleging that you stored hazardous materials in your unit. We also have records showing that your renter's insurance policy was significantly downgraded 2 months prior to the fire. Can you explain this? I stood up. My legs felt like water. Commissioner, I said. My voice was small. I cleared my throat and tried again. Commissioner, I did not store fuel in my apartment. The box the witness referred to contained cleaning supplies for a charity drive. And the insurance, Vance asked. Why lower your coverage to $5,000 if you were not anticipating a loss? I didn't lower it, I said. The Skyline attorney scoffed. We have the email confirmation. Ms. Ross, it came from your account. It was authorized over the phone. I said, turning to look at him. I looked at the call logs. The person who authorized the change verified my identity by answering 2 security questions. And what were those questions, Vance asked. My mother's maiden name, I said, and the street I grew up on. The room went silent. These are not questions a random identity thief would guess. I continued, my voice gaining strength. And they are not questions a landlord would know. They are questions that only family would know. I looked at the back of the room. My mother didn't move. She stared straight ahead, her profile etched in stone. Someone used my personal history to dismantle my financial protection. I said, just like someone used my personal information to redirect my mail to a private box I never rented. I placed the forgery from the bank on the table. David slid it toward the commissioner. This is a change of address form. I said, it was notarized at First Merchants Bank. The notary remembers the woman who signed it. She remembers that the woman was wearing a brace on her wrist and had to practice the signature. Vance looked at the document. She looked at the signature. This redirects mail to a box registered to Vantage Point Holdings. Vance read, Who is Vantage Point Holdings? Grant stood up again. Vantage Point Holdings is a limited liability company registered to Arthur Sterling, he said. He pointed to the back of the room. Mr. Sterling is present today. All heads turned. Arthur Sterling looked annoyed. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. This is ridiculous, Arthur said. His voice was booming. The voice of a man used to commanding boardrooms. I am a family friend. I have been helping the Ross family with estate planning. The LLC was set up to manage assets for Hazel. She is troubled. We were trying to protect her financial future. Protect her, Grant asked. By hiding her mail, by cutting off her insurance. We were trying to conserve cash flow, Arthur snapped. Hazel has a history of poor financial decisions. Grant picked up a piece of paper from his stack. Mr. Sterling, Grant said. You submitted a sworn statement claiming you were at your home in the Hamptons on the night of the fire. Is that correct? Arthur narrowed his eyes. Yes, I was. Then can you explain this? Grant asked. He held up a receipt. It was a small, crumpled slip of paper. This is a credit card receipt from a gas station on 4th Street, Grant said. 2 blocks from the private mailbox center. It is dated November 10th, at 1:15 in the morning, an hour before the fire started. Arthur froze. It shows a purchase of $20 in gas, Grant said, and a red plastic gas can. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum. I didn't. Arthur stammered. That's not my card. It is your corporate card, Grant said, the one registered to Vantage Point Holdings. Arthur looked at his lawyer. who was suddenly very interested in his briefcase. "I might have lent the card to an employee," Arthur said. "I have many contractors." Grant turned to the commissioner. "We have video footage of a man walking from the direction of the gas station to the alley behind the apartment building at 2 a.m. Grant said, "The man has a distinct gait. He favors his left leg." Grant turned to look at my father. "Mr. Ross," Grant said, "you had knee surgery 6 months ago, correct?" My father looked up. His face was the color of old ash. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "Objection," Arthur's lawyer shouted from the back. "You are badgering a witness who isn't even on the stand. This is an investigative hearing, not a criminal trial," Vance said sharply. "We are establishing facts. Mr. Ross, please answer the question." My father stood up. He was shaking. He looked like a puppet whose strings had been cut. Yes," he whispered. "I had surgery." "And were you in the alley that night?" Grant asked. "No," my father cried. It came out as a yelp. "No, I was in bed." Grant looked at me. He nodded. I pulled out my phone. I connected it to the small Bluetooth speaker David had brought. "Commissioner, I have a recording." I said, "From 3 days ago, when my father came to my temporary residence." I hit play. The sound of my father's voice filled the room. It was tinny, desperate. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. You were supposed to be away. The plan got out of control. Arthur said it would be contained." The recording ended. My father sank back into his chair. He put his head in his hands. Arthur Sterling turned purple. "That is out of context," he shouted. "That is a manipulated recording. She is mentally unstable. She is baiting him." Commissioner Vance looked at Arthur. Then she looked at my father. "Mr. Ross," she said, "what plan were you referring to?" My father looked up. He looked at Arthur. He looked at my mother. My mother hissed at him. "Robert, be quiet." But he couldn't. The pressure was too high. The vessel had cracked. "The renovation," he whispered. "Speak up," Vance commanded. "The renovation," my father shouted, tears streaming down his face. "We needed the renovation money, the equity. We were going to lose the house," Arthur said, "if the building had a fire. The insurance would pay for a complete gut. We would get the construction contract. We would get the equity share." He pointed a shaking finger at me. "She wasn't supposed to be there. We thought she was in Chicago. We checked her calendar." The room erupted. The insurance adjusters were typing furiously on their laptops. The Skyline attorneys were looking at Arthur Sterling with expressions of pure horror. Commissioner Vance banged her hand on the table. Silence. She looked at the Skyline representative. "Mr. Henderson," she said, "did you know about this? Did Skyline management know this was a planned event?" The representative stood up fast. He looked terrified. "Absolutely not. Commissioner, we manage the property. We do not own it. We take our direction from the ownership group." He paused. He looked at my mother. He decided, in that split second, that he was not going to prison for these people. "However," he added, his voice trembling slightly, "I would like to enter into the record a phone call log from October." He pulled a sheet of paper from his file. "On October 15th, we received a call from Mrs. Susan Ross. She identified herself as the mother of the tenant in 3C. She asked specific questions about the building's master insurance policy. She wanted to know the deductible. She wanted to know the timeline for claims processing." He looked at my mother. She said she was asking because she was concerned about her daughter's safety. She wanted to make sure the building was fully insured in case of an emergency. Commissioner Vance turned her eyes to my mother. "Mrs. Ross," Vance said, "is this true?" My mother stood up. She smoothed her coat. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the adjusters, the lawyers, the commissioner. She did not look at my father, who was weeping. She did not look at Arthur, who was staring at the wall. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the hate. It wasn't the cold indifference of the "not our problem" phone call. It was a hot, bright hate. The hate of a narcissist who has been exposed. "Hazel is confused," my mother said. Her voice was steady, terrifyingly calm. "She has always been confused. She has a history of delusions. She imagines plots against her. She gestured to me with a manicured hand. Look at her. She is vindictive. She is jealous of our success. She has orchestrated this entire charade to punish us because we cut her off financially. She is the one who set the fire. She is the one who wanted the payout. She turned to the commissioner, her eyes wide and pleading. My husband is a confused old man. He is under her spell. She manipulates him. She baited him into saying those things, but I'm telling you, as her mother, she is dangerous. She needs help. We tried to get her help. We tried to get her to sign an agreement to go to a clinic, and she refused. I sat there, frozen. She was doing it, even now, even with the receipts, the video, the audio, the phone logs. She was standing in a room full of federal investigators and choosing the lie. She was willing to burn me at the stake to keep her own hands clean. Commissioner Vance stared at my mother. She let the silence stretch for a long time. Mrs. Ross, Vance said quietly, we have a receipt from Mr. Sterling's credit card buying a gas can. We have video of a man with your husband's limp carrying it. We have a forged document with your handwriting. And we have your husband's confession on tape. Vance leaned forward. The only person who seems confused here is you. You seem to be confused about the difference between a mother and a conspirator. My mother's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The mask cracked. The dignity dissolved into a rictus of panic. Grant Ellison stood up. Commissioner, he said, given the testimony today and the evidence presented, the fire marshal's office is officially reclassifying this incident as arson and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. We are recommending immediate escalation to the district attorney's office for criminal charges against Arthur Sterling, Robert Ross, and Susan Ross. Vance nodded. Recommendation accepted, she said. This hearing is adjourned. The transcripts will be forwarded to the police. She banged her hand on the table. The room exploded into motion. The Skyline lawyers were up instantly, practically running out the door to distance themselves. The insurance adjusters were on their phones, likely freezing assets. I sat still. Grant walked over to me. He put a hand on my shoulder. You did it, Hazel, he said softly. I looked at the back of the room. My father was sobbing, his head on his knees. Arthur Sterling was shouting at his lawyer, his face a mottled red. And my mother, she was standing alone. The space around her was empty, as if she were contagious. She was looking at me. Her eyes were not angry anymore. They were blank. She looked like a statue that had been toppled but hadn't yet hit the ground. I stood up. I gathered my papers. I walked toward the door. I had to pass them to leave. When I got to my mother, I stopped. She looked at me. You ruined us, she whispered. Her voice was a hiss of pure venom. I hope you are happy. You ruined your own family. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had forged my name, who had packed bins while my home burned, who had tried to sell my silence for $50,000. I didn't ruin us. Mom, I said, I just survived you. I walked past her. I walked out of the conference room and into the hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The air smelled of floor wax. David, the attorney, was right behind me. Hazel, he said, listen, this is a win, a huge win. But I need to warn you. I stopped. I turned to him. What? This isn't over, he said. The criminal case will take months, maybe years. Arthur has money. He will drag this out. He will appeal. Your parents. They will likely be charged. But they might get plea deals. It is going to be messy. You are going to have to testify again. And again. I know. I said, and you won't get closure today. David said, there is no check waiting for you. The insurance payout for your things. Skyline will fight it. It could be a long time before you see a dime. I adjusted the strap of my bag. I felt the weight of the grandmother's letter in my pocket. I don't care about the money. David, I said, then what do you care about? He asked. I looked back at the closed door of the hearing room. I could hear the muffled sound of shouting from inside. I care that they know, I said. I care that when they look at me, they don't see a victim anymore. They see the person who beat them. I walked toward the elevator. I pushed the button. The doors opened. I stepped inside. I was alone. I looked at my reflection in the polished metal of the doors. I looked tired. My hair was a little messy. My blazer was cheap, but I was standing. I was Hazel Ross. I was 34 years old. I had no apartment. I had no parents. I had a long, ugly legal battle ahead of me. But as the elevator started to descend, taking me down to the street where the rain had finally stopped, I realized something. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for permission to exist. The fire had taken everything that could be burned, and what was left was fireproof. Thank you for listening to After My Apartment Burned. My parents said, "Not our problem," until the fire investigator arrived. This story explored the painful reality that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us are the ones holding the match. Hazel's journey was not just about solving a crime, but about breaking the cycle of emotional neglect and finding the strength to stand alone. I would love to hear your thoughts on Hazel's decision to testify. Do you think she made the right choice, knowing the cost? Please leave a comment below, letting me know where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed this series, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, resilience, and the turning of tables. Until next time.